Hi guys, it's Mark. Sorry for the voice, but I woke up like this today. And leave that aside, today we're going to build a placement system in Unreal Engine 5. It's going to be a long tutorial, so let's get started. Oh, and I recommend you check out the other two tutorials on the pickup system to avoid any misunderstandings, okay? Let's start. The first thing we want to do is go to structures, go to item info. So basically our structure, if you don't have it, create a structure, okay? And after this variable, I want to add another variables. Okay, and the last one is our default material. And this, of course, it's not an array, it's a single, and of course, it's a material. Perfect, so let's save, and we want to set up also our default values. So I choose for can be placed, yes, snap to the ground, yes. Maximum range, I choose 1000 because I think it's useful in my case, but of course you can choose whatever you want. It's only an example. Offset, I choose also for the same reason 50, because basically is the half of the scale of our cube that I choose for this example. I want to also to set up our valid tags. I choose only one, like ground, and default material, I choose none. Okay, so let's save. We must go in our data table. I call it data inventory. And basically, I want to stop our cube. So like a mesh, I choose cube. And also default material, I choose basic shape material. Okay, it's basically white. So let's click save. And now we have our cube. Of course, if you have multiple items, you must set up every item or every category, okay? So let's save and close this tab. Now we wanted to create our component because basically we set up our dynamics, our system in that component. What is a component? Basically, it's like a piece of code that you can attack to like an others blueprints, other blueprints actor. And so it's very useful because basically you can set up one system, so multiple functions. You can use it where you want. So I call it bp underscore placement manager, sorry, component. Yes. Double click, maybe on the drawer, let's save all. Okay, so now we want to set up many different variables. I know it's like a boring thing, but it's so important. Okay, so now we have all these different variables. So I choose data table, and here I want to set up our data table, data inventory. Current item data is basically our item info. So for current item data, I choose st item info, preview actor like an actor, placement mode boolean, player, my player, so third person character in my case, a player controller, and the current inventory index I choose string for commodity. But of course, if you want, you can choose integer. Okay, so we have 3 different material interfaces for valid. So basically, if you can place it, place the object in the word, invalid if you cannot. And default, basically, like if you don't move anything. At least inventory UI, so basically our user interface to communicate with this component. So I want only to choose category here, and of course I choose materials also for this, so it's basically more tidy. Okay, so now we want to create our first function, but because we must create many different functions, not tiers, or sorry, here we must create a function, and this is basically start placement. Okay, so for the start placement, basically we want to set up our placement mode. So we want to get our index from the input. So I choose index, I choose string. Okay, so we have our index, and we want also to control if this index have some objects in it. So to do this, we want a condition here. So basically we want like if branch, and this is basically like a condition here. We want to get our elementary UI get. We want to get all our variables that contain the number of item for that category. So for in my case, I've called it I0, I1, and I2. So get I0, yes, and also get I2. And of course, I can show you here. So go content, blueprints, UI, inventory UI. Yes, go in graph, and you can see that I have 3 variables that basically contain the value of that 3 categories. Because in my case, my inventory has only 3 categories, of course. Okay, so now we want a sequence here. So let's get sequence. Before control the condition, basically we want to use a switch on integer. Yes, here. Okay, I colligate it here. Of course, this works only with few categories. If you have multiple categories, maybe you want to create a function that works equally and maybe take the index and do some things. But in my case, in many cases, I think you can use only switch and do some graphs. So let's colligate it here. So in the selection, yes. And of course, if it's 0, we want simple to set a variable that is basically an integer. And I will call it number item category, yes. And basically we want to set it here and also here and also here 3 times. Basically here, sorry for the mess. Okay, and now we want to control basically if there is some objects in there. So if basically it's greater than 0. Okay, also for those. So let's get there. And the last thing to do is basically our condition or boolean. Yes, I want to add another pin, colligate it here and also here, and perfect, we have our condition. So basically if there are some objects in there, is true, okay? Otherwise, of course, it's false. So I want this go to true, and we want to get data table row. Not this. I want to get data table row struct. Yes. Our data table is basically this, our data table inventory. And of course, we want this index here. We want to set up. Maybe I can set up here. So let's get set here. So current inventory index, get set, then 1, set it here. Okay, perfect. So we have our index. And now we want to get our index and use it for the row name, because basically if you go to data table, you can see that basically I have nominated. Basically the name of this row is basically 0 and this is 1. So basically it's our ID, it's our index, it's equal. Okay, so we can use it like this. There is a little conversion, no problem. Okay, and now we want to save this row in our current item data. Yes, our struct. So let's get set it here when the row is found. And of course we can split it here, split struct pin. Okay, we have it. And we want to control with a branch. With a branch, if the condition can be placed, it's true. Because otherwise we cannot create anything, because we cannot place it. Okay, so get is in placement mode set, and if it's true, we set our placement mode in true. Okay, let's compile and save. And now we can create another function that basically our preview actor. So go here, click add, and we must create a preview actor. Yes, we have it. So turn and start placement and call it. Okay, so we have done everything here. So come back and create preview actor. And now we want to create our actor, of course. So basically we want to control if a preview actor is already valid, because if it is, we want to destroy it because we want to set up a new preview actor. Okay, so if it's valid, I want to destroy actor here. Yes. And the target is basically our preview actor. So we can spawn actor from class here, and also colligate is not valid, okay, because it works also here. Perfect. So class is basically actor, generical. And the spawn transform is basically our player, so get player. And we want that location, so get actor location. Get actor location, yes. And we want to use it for the location here, so split it. Sorry, split, yes, extract. We want to add it to a forward vector forward, yes. And this we want to multiply for 200. So I choose here float and basically 200. And I colligate here and also here. So basically we can spawn our actor. We must use it for our preview actor, so we must set it here. Perfect. And also we want to add a component here, so add component by class, yes. And this component is basically our static mesh component, yes. So I can colligate it here. And I want also to set our static mesh, set static mesh, because we want to see it, okay. So target is basically this. And for new mesh, I choose current item data, get, break, of course split, it's equally the same. And we want to get our data mesh, okay. So the mesh that we choose for that category. We want also to add another component, add component by class. This component is basically a box collision or a sphere collision. In this case, of course, it's a cube, so it, I think, more obvious like a box collision. But if you have like a different type of object that is maybe like a sphere or something like this, maybe you want to set up a sphere collision. After this box collision, of course, we must choose the extent of the box. If you have a sphere, is basically the radius, okay. And it is important that the target of box collision is our actor object reference. So colligate it here, okay. And in box extent, I basically choose our offset. So here I choose offset. And now we want also to set collision enable. Okay, so basically we colligate the static mesh to target, and this is our set collision enable, because we want to set the type to no collision of, okay. So basically that preview object basically don't interact with the world, it's only snap to the ground, but if there is something overlapping, that not create a problem, okay. And the last thing to do here is to set, set the component tick enable. It's basically the target itself because it's our placement manager component, okay. So basically we want to active this component tick. So let's go in event graph, and now we want to set up our event tick, because we want to create like a line trace by channel. What is line trace by channel is basically like a laser that can hit something, okay, and have a start and an end. It's a vector, okay. And for the start and also for the end, I will choose to create a variable here in the event begin play. In reality, we want to set two things here, sorry. The first one is our player controller. So set player controller, and it's basically we want to get player controller. So we have set it our player controller, and now we want to also set another variable that basically it's like a vector 2D, and I call it screen center. So to do this, we want to set it here, and basically it's like our get viewport size, yes. And this value we want to split it because we wanted to divide the x and the epsilon by 2. here and also here. Okay, and after this we want to make another vector that is basically composed by x divided by 2 and epsilon divided by 2. Return value here, and we have it. Okay, we have set our screen center. So let's compile and save, and now we want to get it, and also we want to use something particular because basically we want to deproject the screen to Word. Okay, for this I want also player controller. If you don't have it here, you can also get it here. Okay, what does it? Basically transform the viewport size in like yes, a 3D world. So basically like the middle of the screen is not like a 2D position, but it's like a 3 position because it's the position in the world. It's very difficult to explain, I know, but I try my best. Sorry for some maybe not clear phrases. So basically you wanted to use it for like have points in real world for the viewport only. Okay, but we don't use word position but only word direction. Why this? Because we want that the line trace, so the laser basically starts from the player position, not from the screen position. How to do this? Basically we want to get our player and we want to get actor location. So the return value go here in the start, and the word direction can go here, and we want to multiply it and also add it to our actor location. So basically go here, here, and finally here in end. But what we are gonna multiply with our word direction? Basically we want to get our current item data, so get split, and we want to use our, of course, our range. Oh sorry, here. So basically the line trace have like starts basically from the actor location, and the final destination is basically our max distance. Okay, so now we have set up our line trace. If you want to debug, and it's so useful, please choose this draw debug type and choose for one frame. When it's saved, when it's perfect, you can disable it, but for testing it's so important. Okay, so let's compile and save, and now we have our out it. This it, I want to store it because we can use it later. So basically it's it result, yes. So set it here, and we want to use this value for a branch, because if basically it's something, we can do other stuffs like set the actor location. Why this? Set actor location, because basically we have spawn our object here in create preview actor. So basically we have spawned this object in basically near actor location, and it doesn't work because we want to use our line trace. So this location is basically our line trace, so I want to break it. Okay, so I want to break it result and use the location. So I want to add to the location our current item data, get, and split it. So we want to use our offset. Why this? So basically we can snap to the ground. Okay, it's perfect like this. But before colligate these nodes, we want also to store this location. I know we have so much variables, but it's more efficient like this, I promise. So I want like a vector, yes, set through here and go here, yes, new location, and also perfect. So we have our set actor location. Compile and save. What's the problem here? Because the target is self, okay, so we want to get our preview actor and colligate it here. So now we want also to check if it can be placed. So I can create another function, is valid placement. Okay, and before start anything here, want also to return to event graph in the tick. and we want to call it this output because basically we want to control if it's valid. Okay, and if it's valid, so I want a condition. If it's true, basically we want to set material, and the target is primitive component. So we want our where it is preview actor, yes, get preview actor, and we want to get our get component by class, and it's not actor component, it's our static mesh component, yes, and the return value go here in target. So it's basically to set our material, and I want to duplicate and also did the same thing here. So let's colligate it here, and now we want to set up our material. If it's valid, I colligate here in true, and if it is not valid, here. Okay, perfect. Let's compile and save, and now we can create our isValid placement. So basically here we want to set up 3 conditions and control if all these conditions are true in the same time. Okay, the first condition is basically if the distance is correct. So basically I want to get our location, get location, and also our player, get player, and get player position. So sorry, get actor location, and we want to subtract to have the distance. Okay, and also use the length, the vector length. Okay, and so we have the distance, and now we want to control if it's less than our range. So we can get our current item data get, and we want to split it, split struct, and here we want to get our maximum range. Okay, compile and save, and now we have our first condition. The second condition is a bit different because it's basically we want to control if a depth floor basically have that tag. So how to do this? Basically we want to create a loop. So we want for each loop, and we want to use it for this array, something strange, I think. So preview actor, get preview actor, and we want to get tags, yes, and use it. And for these tags, basically we want to control in the loop body if each item is contained in another array. That is basically the array of our tags, our valid tags. How to do this? Basically we can get here our valid tags. So I choose contains item, yes, and we can colligate it here, array element, perfect. Maybe we can organize it a little bit. If you select 2 item, you can press Q and you can align them. Okay, so contains, and okay, if it contains here, we want to set a variable true, and this is maybe, I think there is a tag valid, so I set it here. No, sorry, here. Okay, on the loop body, perfect. Okay, so after done this, basically we have done also the second condition. So I want to add a if branch here. Okay, and we want to colligate complete here in branch. Why this? Because basically our third condition is only doesn't request an execute node. The third condition is basically we want to check if the object overlap with some actors, not every actors, but only the actors that we decide. How to do this? Basically we can get our preview actor, and basically we want to get component not by tag but by class, yes, and it's basically our collision. So maybe for you it's a sphere collision. Okay, and we want to set use this value to get overlapping actors. I want 2 of these, but of course you can have so many more filter, because basically we want to get overlapping actors but not everything. We want to filter them by class. If it's basically overlap with third-person characters, so basically our player, or maybe also our pickable object. So also here return value, and now we wanted to control the lamp. Yes, also here. And we want to get this output here and basically control if it's less or equal to 0. Okay, also here, if there aren't third-person characters or maybe pickable objects, you can place the object. So I want to check and boolean also here. And okay, now we can set up our final condition. So basically we want to also and boolean that have 3 nodes. I maybe can move this a little bit here. You can colligate the third condition here, the second condition here, and the first condition here. But we can colligate here, of course, in the condition, but before go in return node, so basically return this function. We want to set our text tag valid because we want to set it to false. Otherwise, you hit an object that have the tag correct. After this, when you hit another object that doesn't have the correct tag, there is tag valid, it's always set to true. So it creates some problems. So basically we want to set to false when this is done to be sure that everything works fine, okay? So basically you want this return node and of course it's valid to true and otherwise it's valid to false. Okay, compile and save, and now we want to set up not our final function. Basically it like try place object. So basically we want to call is valid placement for security. Okay, so we call it and the target is then self. And if it's valid, so if it's valid, I want to spawn actor from class. And the class is basically not our actor in this case, but it's our pickable object. So for the spawn transform, I want to split it and use the location that we have saved some minutes ago. So I want to get it. And this is basically our location. Okay, we want to set our static mesh. Okay, so I want to set static mesh. Okay, and of course the target is here. Okay, perfect. And our static mesh is basically our current item data break or split always. And of course it's our data mesh. And also we want to set up our material. The target is always our static mesh, a static mesh component, of course. Okay, so basically we want to get our default material here. Perfect. Compile and save. And now we want to call our last function for our component. The last function is basically cancel placement. Okay, so we want to call it here. So cancel placement in try place object here. Okay. And in the cancel placement, basically we want to control if the preview actor is valid. And if it is, I want to basically destroy it. Target here. Okay. Okay, so we have our destroy actor. And after this, we want to set our variable to default. To do this, we want always to set our placement mode to false. Okay, because we don't want to place something in that moment. And also colligate that here is important. Okay, and now we want also to set to default our current item data. Okay, to do this, we want to create like a backup because in Unreal Engine 5 you cannot do something like this. Okay, you must create like a default structure. So default item data is our SD item info, and basically these have the default value of our item info. Okay, so get, and I want to choose it for current item data. And we want also to set to 0 our current inventory index. So set to like 0. Okay, so we have done everything, and now we can basically add this component to our third person. So go in content drawer, content third person, of course if you have this template, otherwise go in your player. So third person blueprints, third person car, yes. Okay, so now we want to add that component, basically our BP underscore placement manager component, yes. And in the event being play, we want to set up two variables. We want to set inventory UI, that is basically our inventory here, inventory UI. So the reference to that widget. You cannot choose it like here, because you have the option, but it doesn't work always, because sometimes there is a problem. Why this? Because basically you choose that class, not that widget, because in reality you create a widget or like an instance of that class, not that class. Of course, if you have some problems with this tutorial, please comment below, and I promise that I'll do my best to respond to you. So let's continue, and we want to set up another variable that basically our layer. So let's get it here, and of course it's basically a self-reference. Okay, so compile and save, and now we want to set up our iteration. How to do this? Basically we go to control drawer and go in content, input, actions, and we want to set up 3 different input actions that we use later. The first one is basically our AI start placement mode. Okay. The second one is I want to rename it, of course, and it's basically cancel placement. And the third one is basically our interaction with the UI. Okay, we will do this later. So it's basically select the index. Okay, so we have these 3 different input action. We want to go in input, and we want to MC default, and we want to add 3 different action. The first one is of course our start placement mode. The second one is our cancel placement mode, and the third one is our select index. Okay, so the first one is our placement mode, and I choose left click of the mouse, and the second one I choose right click, of course, and the third one is basically, yes, I choose the numbers of the keyboard, like 1. I also choose 2, and I also choose 3, because I have 3 categories. If you have more categories, of course, you can set up what you want. So basically, if it's pressed, you can do everything. And now we want to use it. So search AI start placement mode. Yes. Okay, so we want to check this value. Okay, so now we want to control if it's trigger. We want a branch. Why this is a branch? Because we want to control with our component if the placement mode, so placement mode is true or not. Because if it's true, we want to try place object here. Yes, like this. And the second one here is also, maybe I move it a little bit. And if it's false, I want to call start placement. Okay, because basically if placement mode is not active, you start the placement mode. Otherwise, you try to place all the object. And the index, okay, for the index, we want to set up something later. And so compile and save. Okay, now we want only to adjust a little thing here in the, not in the placement, go in pickable object. If you have seen my previous tutorials, go here, blueprints, pickable object. And here in the collision, I noticed that there is a problem, because it's not here in the sphere. It's not overlap only pawn, but we wanted to set up a trigger. So we want to go now in the inventory UI, okay? Because we want to set up our index. So we want to set up, I think, 4 different variables. 2 for the index and other 2 in reality for a simple way to show what index you are using, okay? So the first one is a current index, and basically an integer now. Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, because I want also another that is basically last index. Perfect. Another variable that basically is translate color structure, okay, here. I want also another that is not color if selected, but is color by default. Okay. Okay, and now it's perfect. Compile and save. Now we wanted to add the two function here. The first one is basically to remove the inventory, and second one is to change color by index. Okay, so the first one is basically you want to, of course, remove the inventory. So basically you want to get switch on integer, and we want to use our current index. So if basically if it's 0, we want to reduce it by 1, otherwise we want to reduce that by 1, and so on. So basically, if you have seen my previous tutorials, the inventory tutorial in particular, you can simply copy the entire graph and simply change something. So basically it's not add, but is like subtract 1. So basically you want to reduce it by 1 and add to text to basically shown the value here. Okay, show it here. Okay, so now we have done this remove the inventory. If you want, you can already call it in our BP placement manager component, try place object. Basically when it starts place it, you can simply call the function. So we can get our inventory UI and call the function. Okay, remove the inventory. Yes. Okay, so basically we can call it here before cancel placement in try place object. Compile and save, and now we can return back in inventory UI to set up our index and that color. So in change color by index, basically we want to, of course, use always switch on integer, and we want to use it 2 times. The first one is for the last index that we set up later, and the second one is for current index. So basically you can duplicate this graph that I'm going to do. Okay, so basically here we wanted to change only current index and not the last index. Okay, so now we basically wanted only to change our selection and not color by default, but I want to choose a color if selected. Why I choose last index? Because basically we want also to change the tint of the last index. Otherwise, by default, the color is like have an opacity of 0 and you don't see the item anymore. Okay, so after all this, we want only to set up our last index to current index. Okay, so it remind basically our index. Compile and save, and now we want, of course, to set up our color if selected. So basically I think like orange can be good. Color by default is like white basically. So let's compile and save, and now we want only to set up our index. So let's return back in event graph, and now we want to set up here when is a construct. Basically we want to set up a default value. Okay, so basically we want to get item 1 and tint, set brush tint color, yes, and this tint is basically our color if select. So basically, if you don't choose anything, it's basically our index 0. Okay, compile and save. And now we want also to add our input action that we have done later, before, sorry. So I call it AI underscore select index. Okay, and basically that have a value. The value here, if we go in input action and you go in select index, you can here change not boolean, sorry, I have done a mistake, it's a float. So let's save, and now we can come back in the mapping context. So here in the select index, we want to choose that value. So modifier, choose scalar, and choose here 111 for the first. The second one, of course, is 222. and so on. Okay, so the item 1 have a value of 1, and we can use that value to reduce it by 1 and simply have our index. Okay, so basically our current index, so set here there is a little conversion and we can set up our current index and it's done. Okay, so you choose 1 and basically the index is 0. If you choose 2 is 1 and so on. So let's compile and save, and now before click this little icon here, we must do another thing. So we want to set up our materials. Basically create a folder, I call it materials. Okay, and now we want to set up our material. The first one is default placement, the second one is _valid placement, and the third one is invalid placement. Okay, so let's save everything, perfect. And now go in default placement. Okay, so we must set up something. The blend mode is like translucent, and okay, we want this color. Press 3 and also press left click of the mouse, and we have a constant RGB. So the base color I choose maybe for the default placement, like white, it's perfect. Okay, and I choose it also for the misfit color, apply and save. And now go in invalid placement. Okay, so always here translucent 3, and we want maybe in this case a red color. I think yes, a color like this. Okay, perfect. So now we want to colligate it to base color. I will not choose the same, I choose maybe like more brighter color. Okay, click save. And now we can do the same thing for value placement. Of course, I don't choose red, I choose like green value. Save everything. Okay, there is a little problem here. So here I don't want to use preview actor, I want to use it actor. So how to do this? Basically we want to get it, split, and use it actor. Yes, compile and save. And now we want also to add here not our start placement mode, but also the other input action. So it's basically our cancel placement, and if it's trigger, I call it the placement manager and call cancel placement. Yes, compile and save. Go here in cancel placement, in the function of our component, and also add this little node. So set component tick enable and disable it. Okay, so when it's over, it basically doesn't start again the tick. Okay, of course we also must set up in third person character here the start placement, because we want to set up our index. So get inventory UI, get current index, yes, and I want to colligate it here. Okay, compile and save. Okay, so we must of course set up like here our materials. So I choose here valid placement material, I choose valid placement, invalid, of course I choose invalid, and for default, yes, for default I choose of course our material that we have created some minutes ago. Okay, so now we go in the viewport and we want to add a tag here, because we want that to place the object here. It must have a actor tag, yes, and it's basically ground tag. So basically the problem is here because basically I don't have called this function, so I want to call it. And okay, now it can be perfect. So I press 2, yes, perfect. 1, 2, 3. Okay, don't worry for this white icon, it's not a problem because in reality I have not set up any icon. So basically if I take these objects, it works finally. And I know this tutorial is so long, but important that you know everything very well. So if you want to modify, there is no problem, and I think that you can also add in many different games, most of all survival games. And so yes, it works. I'm very happy. Please, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. So thanks for watching, and bye bye guys.